Welcome back. This is part 2 of the 3-part training podcast for NAWMBA panel moderators. In part 1, we learned about what your role is as a panel moderator, and we talked about what to do before conference so that the day of the panel, your panelists will be ready, and so will you. On the day of the panel, you want to meet with your panelists beforehand to remind them of the expectations. You might say something like this: as we've discussed already, I'll introduce the panel and tell the audience how this is going to go. Then we'll begin with the prepared questions we've developed together. You'll have about 2 to 3 minutes for each answer. I know it's hard to keep an eye on the clock when you're really into speaking, so if it looks like we're going overtime, I'll slide a piece of paper across the table towards you to signal a wrap-up. You might have some other kind of signal that you might send to them, just glancing to them and making eye contact, or touching your watch. The key here is that you've talked with the panelists ahead of time about what kind of signal you're going to send them when it looks like they're about to go overtime. That's going to set their expectations about how you'll be able to control the timing and the flow of the panel. One of the things you need to be sure to have as you move to your room is your conference contact and emergency numbers ready. Generally at NAWMBA you'll have a session facilitator there who will also have this information, but you want to be prepared just in case. In the room where you meet the panelists, there will be a handout available that has the panelist information on it. This is for attendees to take away with them if they want to contact the panelists later. So the handout will have the name of the panel, the name of the panelists, and their contact information. When you get to your room, check it. Make sure that there are enough seats there. Make sure your audio-visual equipment is working if you need any. And be sure to turn off your cell phone. There's nothing more embarrassing than having your cell phone ringtone play Sex in the City while you're trying to moderate a panel. Finally, seat the panelists and arrange your chair so that you can see them. Remember that we've already discussed how important it is so that you can see them so you can send them a timing signal if you need to. As the attendees come into the room and are seated, stand up and make eye contact with the audience. Introduce yourself. Tell the audience how the panel will be structured. Let them know that they'll be answering a few prearranged questions and that after that, you'll open up the discussion to the audience to take their questions. Next, introduce your panelists very briefly, and this just means their name and their title and their affiliation, because probably your first question would involve asking them to introduce themselves or tell the audience why they're there to discuss a topic. Then, get ready to move to your first prepared question for the panelists. It's important that you set the stage for your audience, let them know how the panel is going to run, and introduce your panelists before you begin. So your panel is off to a great start. During the actual panel itself, your role is to be sure everyone has a chance to contribute and participate. Nick Rendon, an expert on panel moderation, says, your role is part cop and part diplomat. Between each speaker, you can summarize key points the speaker made before moving to the next panelist, or you can summarize the whole discussion before moving to the next panel question. If a panelist has been speaking for too long, you may have to send a signal to them so you can interrupt and regain the control. If you told them ahead of time during your meeting, this should be easy, but sometimes even a signal is ignored. You need to be relaxed and confident to do this. Remember, you are in charge of this panel. Be polite and be assertive, and use humor with care. So a nonverbal cue might be just making eye contact with the person. Sometimes you may have to use body language to send a nonverbal cue. Some of you may have seen Hillary Clinton doing some interviews in the last election campaign. When Hillary wanted someone to stop, she would hold up her right hand just like a stop sign. It's an excellent nonverbal cue to ask someone to wait and give you a chance. If none of the nonverbal cues have worked and the eye contact hasn't worked, you may have to go verbal. Wait for a brief pause and jump in. You're making some great points, Mary. I'll let Sue offer her perspective, and we'll come back to you if time permits. Or you might say, thanks for those great ideas, Mary, but we need to watch our time, so I'm going to ask Susan to add her thoughts, and then maybe you can meet with some of the audience attendees after the session to talk about this some more. Remember to meet with the panelists to review structure and timing signals. This can't be emphasized enough. When you get someone on a panel that dominates the discussion, it can be uncomfortable for everyone. I'd like for you to take a few minutes on your own and pretend that you are in a position where you need to shut down an overzealous panelist. This is the end of part 2 of our podcast.